Hello, this is Laura Winton, and today I want to talk to you specifically about the quote sandwich and how it mirrors the paper structure in composition. So, I modeled the quote sandwich after Stewie Griffin on Family Guy when he does the compliment sandwich, which is where you say something good, something that needs improvement, and then you finish with something good. So I thought of that as the compliment sandwich as the quote sandwich. So I thought I would explain it that way. And it turns out there are a number of examples of sandwiches and hamburgers being used to explain composition to students, which actually makes sense, particularly within the 5-paragraph essay. But here I thought I was being so clever, and I had come up with something completely original. So you see it happens to teachers too. And you think you're being so clever, and you come up with something just great, and then you find out a lot of people have been using it all along. So that shouldn't discourage you, but don't be smug. So here's one example. I'm going to move my face. Here's an example of the 5-paragraph essay. And here's another one, and they both have the top and bottom bun as the introduction and conclusion, and then the examples or the 3 paragraphs in the 5-paragraph essay would be the meat of the essay. Okay, so, and then they also use it to explain paragraphs with the topic sentence at the top part of the bun, and the concluding sentence, the transition sentence, whatever, depending on how you write your paragraph. That's the bottom part of the bun, and then details and examples are the meat of the bun. Okay, so you can see how the structure of a paper itself is mimicked in the structure of a paragraph. Okay, and it's kind of the same thing when you're using quotes and examples. So I'm going to talk specifically about quotes, but this can also apply to examples as well. Okay, so once again, the structure of the essay equals the structure of the paragraph. Okay, topic sentence, introduction is equivalent to the introduction thesis sentence, and the closing sentence and transition are analogous to the conclusion. Okay, so once you talk about an idea or aspect of the paper completely, move on to the next. Okay, and there, once again, let me move my face. There is the paragraph sandwich. Okay, so working with quotes is kind of the same thing. Okay, so you'll have, just as you wouldn't introduce a subject and not explain it in more depth, you wouldn't just say, oh, dogs, period, or dogs are cool and fluffy and fun. This is my paper, thank you very much, right? So by the same way, you shouldn't just introduce a quote and then act as if it speaks for itself, okay? Just because it's obvious to you why you chose a quote doesn't mean that it will be obvious to your reader, okay? And that's really easy to do. I mean, I did that even in graduate school, right? You put a quote out there and it seems so obvious, and you think that, you know, you can't explain it any better than the author has explained it, and the author has already made the exact point that you want to make, so why should you explain it more, okay? So I'm going to tell you how you can fix this and make the quote make sense within the context of your paper, okay? Because that's what you want it to do, right? The quote may exactly say what you want to say, but you still need to tell the reader why you picked that quote and what it means within the context of what you're writing about. Because you're not writing the exact same thing the author has written. You're writing about something that's maybe similar or completely different, okay? And I'll give you an example too. All right, so every time you use a quote in your paper, again, think of it as the quote sandwich, okay? So here's the sandwich, the bun and the meat and the, you know, bottom bun, okay? The top part of the bun is where you talk generally about the situation that you're going to use the quote in. So that's kind of like the thesis or the introduction, right, to the paper, or the topic sentence to your paragraph. Then you have the actual quote, okay, which is like the body of the overall paper. And I'm going to move my face over here now, okay? And then you will have the explanation of what the quote means within the context of your paper. Okay, so let's look at a paragraph. I wrote this early graduate school. Okay, it's not I hope it's not terribly advanced. So The celebration of the creative individual need not stop with the one who tells the story, but should also extend to the individual listener. As Christine Bachelega notes, in studying the storytellers themselves, folklorists have resisted reflecting on the subject, preferring to go on celebrating the creative individual. The creative individual in this case is the storyteller. But the power of fairy tales lies in its effect on the creativity of the listener, not necessarily in placing themselves subjectively into the narrative, into the story, but in their suspension of disbelief, planting the idea that anything is possible, that any dream is worth expressing or indulging in. Okay, so this is talking about the effect that fairy tales have on listeners, that they can put themselves into the situation, or again, suspension of disbelief, which we talk about in theater a lot as well, is to put yourself into any kind of situation. Okay, fairy tales especially, because there's situations where, there are witches and there are wolves and there are, a wolf can dress up in grandmother's clothing and talk, and so that implies anything is possible, right? Okay, so let's break down this paragraph. Okay, first we have the setup to the quote. The celebration of the creative individual need not stop with the one who tells the story, but should also extend to the individual listener. Okay, so I'm setting up the situation, I'm setting up what it is I want to talk about in that paragraph. Okay, then next I have the quote itself. As Christine Bachelega notes, and I have the quote, right? And then I have what I'm going to do with the quote, how the quote is being used. And here, once again, I'll move my face. Here the quote is being used as a contrast between what's currently believed or currently practiced and what it should be, okay? So I'm talking about how the power of the fairy tale, yes, there's a creative individual who tells the tale, but there's also creativity of the people involved. And so rather than reflecting on the subject, folklore should also look at the people who hear the fairy tale and its effect on them. Okay, so a quote sandwich does not need to be a paragraph in itself. It might, like mine, okay, but it might also be part of a larger paragraph. So, and many paragraphs use multiple quotes, especially when you get into more advanced writing, okay, or you might use several quotes that illustrate the same point, and you might say, as Smith and Anderson have said, maybe they have quotes that tell exactly the same thing, okay, or tell about the same subject, okay. So it doesn't need to be one quote, doesn't need to be one paragraph necessarily. And this is really a kind of quick and dirty, kind of reductive way to work with it, right? Because when you get on to more advanced writing and when you get into junior, senior level writing or graduate level writing, you might have a quote at the beginning of the paragraph, and then you'll explain, the context and what it means. Or you might have a quote at the end of the paragraph. But for now, the quote sandwich is a good way to ease into working with a quote, okay? So the quote sandwich does not need to be the whole paragraph, all right? And I also want you, once again, to note the way that papers and the way that structures mimic each other within a paper, okay? So the structure at the micro level of detail, quotes, things like that, also mimic, again, the structure at the meta level, right? At the upper level, so the structure of the whole overall paper. So here's our little hamburger. And so quotes or examples within a paragraph, the way paragraphs themselves are structured, and the way paragraphs fit in within the overall essay. Okay, and so with everything you do with paragraphs, with quotes or examples, or with the overall essay, you'll have a beginning, okay, a transition maybe, or a rationale. Okay, so that goes at the top. The meat of what you're discussing, the example, the quote, the paragraph, etc., and then the conclusion or the transition to the next item. Okay? So that's it. That's the quote sandwich. That's how it fits into your paper. And again, this is just to help you out at the very beginning. You don't need to follow this every time. Okay, but when you're first getting started to work with quotes, I think this is a good way to help you. All right, thank you.